We are now going to hear from Amber Goodwin. She will be sharing some of her reflections. Amber is the founder of the Community Justice Action Fund and the Community Justice Reform Coalition. Community Justice is the leading gun violence prevention organization working on policy, education, and building resources centered on communities of color. Amber currently is a law clerk in the division of the Travis County District Attorney's Office, where she works on cases for pretrial diversion and gun violence prevention policy. She served as chair of the Austin Gun Violence Task Force, which helped to create the city's first Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And she currently acts as the liaison to the office. In 2019, Goodwin testified at the first ever House congressional hearing on urban gun violence. Please welcome Amber Goodwin.
Good afternoon. Guys, come on. I know I'm the last speaker. Good afternoon. I would also say Amber Goodwin also does not follow directions because that was an old bio. I didn't send it over whenever I was supposed to, but I also am I'm a lawyer. I'm an attorney at the Travis County District Attorney's Office, and so it's really amazing to be here. I want to thank my friend Guthrie. I was joking earlier that I was like, we've known each other for like 30 years, but I actually have known, where is he at? I actually have known Guthrie since he was a teenager. And the way that I met him, we were at a young event for young progressives, and there was someone who was like, there is a young person who is kind of causing trouble. And I think he wants to take things over. And I was like, I gotta meet this person, and it was Guthrie. And so I just thank you so much for all the incredible work you're doing. And I just wanna thank all of you too. You guys are doing the groundwork to help support our communities. You're already leading by faith by the work that you all do every single day. So I'm gonna spend about 10 minutes talking about a really tough issue, gun violence in our country. I'm really honored to be here with some other people, Ayan and others from SEAT, who are really leading this work on the ground. And so what I hope to do in the next couple of minutes is leave you guys with some tangible things that you can actually do on gun violence instead of just kind of feeling like we're hopeless. Does anybody here just raise your hand if you felt hopeless, especially in the last couple of days or weeks about gun violence? Okay, probably everybody that's in here. I came here, I'm from Midland, Texas, so anyone else from West Texas here? So from right down the road, which I would consider right down the road, it's 6 hours away from here. And I grew up in public schools here in Texas, and I'm a very proud Texan, but I'm also been working for the last 10 and a half years on the issue of gun violence. I got to meet Amanda actually probably way before that, probably about 20 years ago, working on different issues here in Texas and across the country. But I have to be honest, this is probably one of the first times that I've been genuinely nervous and scared to speak at an event. And it's not because this is a group of interfaith people or anything like that, and it's not because it's on guns, because I've been talking on this issue for a long time. I started working on this issue about 10 years ago. My first job working on gun violence was working for Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. And so the issue of political violence, not only in this country, but specifically targeted towards women, targeted towards people who are doing the right thing, is not new to people like me. But I do think, and I was about to say, oh my God, I read this article. I didn't read an article. I saw it on TikTok this morning that somebody said, we're in a dark time, but we can't stare at the darkness, right? We can look at it, but we can't continue to stare at it for the rest of our lives and even for the next couple of days and weeks. And so I'm hopeful that we can talk a little bit about the type of courage that you all have already displayed just by being here and doing the work that you all do, but also the type of courage that it takes to work on such a tough issue like gun violence in a place like Texas. I did not know even though I grew up in Midland, I didn't know what a gun was. I didn't know what a magazine was. I didn't know what any of that was until I started working for Gabby. And so, but now I'm intimately involved in the issue of gun violence. And so we have had a lot of wins on the issue of gun violence that I'll talk about, but there obviously is a huge issue with gun violence in this country. And one of the things that I did learn from working with Gabby, but also working with survivors of gun violence, and working with people who had used violence in their lives, who had actually shot and harmed other people, was it takes a lot of courage to work on some of these issues you all are already working on, but the issue of gun violence. It is not an easy thing to do, but it also is something that takes courage and is going to make you uncomfortable. So I'm going to talk about a couple of uncomfortable things, but also want to make sure that you all have what you need to actually be able to talk about this issue. And saying also that I was a little bit nervous about coming here. I almost didn't come as a person of faith, but also as a Black woman, as a woman who leads an organization, as a prosecutor in Texas in a pretty progressive area. It's not an easy time to be doing this work. I'm pretty vocal on social media about the work that's ahead, but I think that there is no more, the stakes could not be higher for any of us in this room, but I think for all of our kids that are in schools, whether they're public schools, but if they're outside of the schools, the stakes could not be higher for how we need to come together to find solutions. So I'm terrified, but I also know that this is something that I feel very called to do, or else I would have been doing something else with my time as a lawyer, would have maybe been doing like fun stuff, like I don't know what fun things lawyers do, we're kind of boring, but you know, because this summit is really talking about religious freedom, I do want to connect some of the dots that you guys have probably already talked about, but you know, the efforts to mandate 10 Commandment displays in classrooms, how that's connected to the misuse of the Bible, between the proposals of, you know, replacing counselors with chaplains, and how that's all connected to these issues of violence that we have in our communities. These are not isolated fights. We're not talking about placing 10 Commandments here and then talking isolated over here about the issue of gun violence. It's part of what I believe is a larger strategy within Christian nationalism to weaponize, literally weaponize weapons in this country. And it's coming as a Texan. I see this every single day as someone who grew up in public schools. Here in Texas, my mom was a public school teacher for 40 years here in Texas. We see this battleground really being made in the field here in Texas. You know, but what I'm really encouraged about is because of all of you and so many of the different coalitions that you work with across the country and here in Texas, is that there's movements to make sure that that's not actually happening in our communities. And I do believe that you guys represent what's the best of what we can do as people of faith. But there's also a lot of distractions. And I won't call what happened last week, which was obviously awful. There's so many other things that happened in our communities that have been disruptive that we could talk about over the last couple of weeks, but I do want to talk about solutions because the solution that has been in front of us whenever it comes to gun violence, especially in Texas, is that school shootings, that government-sponsored prayer is the answer to school shootings. I don't know if anyone in here, I don't want to make you raise your hand, but if you agree with that, there's a lot of people who may agree with that. But I, again, believe that this is a distraction from what the real issues are in our schools. And it's one of the most challenging things is that it's turning people of faith or people that do have faith into a political talking point that we know that we need to not have in this country because it's not helpful. And it's sidelining evidence-based solutions that myself and Ayan and everybody who works for SEAT know can actually work and can actually dramatically reduce violence in our country and has been shown to work even here in Dallas. And I think it also undermines the fact that there's not one religion that garners all of the support for how we keep our community safe. There are children who are dying in our classrooms every single day. So I'm also an adjunct law professor, so I'm gonna ask a couple of questions just very quickly, and I promise I'm not gonna take forever, Guthrie, but just show of hands, who wants to tell me how many people you guys think die by gun violence every year? Ayan and everyone from SEAT cannot answer this question. In America, how many people do you guys think die by gun violence? You know the answer. Anyone else? So every year in America, there's around 40,000 people who die by gun violence. Does anyone know what the mass amount of, you're not allowed to answer again, and neither is anyone over here, what out of those 40,000 people, what's the biggest amount is attributed to what? Suicide. So about anywhere between 2/3 of those deaths are suicide every single year. And one thing that's not talked about a lot, but is really relevant to a lot of things that are happening in our country right now, is that homicides are around anywhere from I think 12 to 14%, and African Americans we're only 13% of the population, but we're usually around 70% of the homicides that happen with gun violence every single year. So a disproportionate number of the gun violence that's happening every single year is happening in communities of color. The issue of children dying in our classrooms, the answer can't be coercion of religion. The answer must be protection, dignity, and safety, and there are solutions that can follow all of that. My faith, the faith that I follow, was not built by coercion. Even I'm here in Texas. I used to be a union organizer, and one of the things that the union always talked to me about was talking about whose side are you on. I was a union organizer. Anyone here union organizers? Okay, I was a SEIU union organizer, and they would always talk about whose side are we on. And that's what I'm asking people today. And we've been asking this for a very long time. Are you on the side of people who are going to actually be committed to making sure that our communities are safe, making sure that we're actually taking all these evidence-based solutions, or are you on the side of people who are going to do actually nothing? So that's what I'm going to ask you guys. Whose side are you guys on? Are you on the side of solutions? Yes. Guys, come on. I know it's late in the afternoon. Okay. Mandatory prayer will not stop bullets. Faith without works and without action will not protect our children. And so there's been a lot of solutions, especially in the last 4 years on the federal level, on the state level, and on the local level, including things like community violence intervention programs, common sense gun laws like background checks, trauma-informed resources for students and families inside and outside of our schools that have actually been shown to dramatically reduce violence. When we talk about counselors, social workers, and educators, actually investing in them and supporting them versus just focusing on religion and not arming teachers and not chaplains that have no training in mental health. These are not partisan ideas. They're proven practical strategies that we have actually seen work not just in Texas but across the country. So all of what I've just talked about takes some courage to do. Some of us in this room have passed federal legislation, have passed state legislation, but one of the things that I want to impart with you guys is that we need to move and live with our faith and with our feet, especially whenever it comes to an issue like gun violence. So is there anyone in here who is ready to actually take action? Yes, okay. So I have a couple of things that I would like for folks to do. One is there's organizations that I'm going to make sure that Guthrie has that you guys should just join their local organizations. This is not money. This is to make sure that you actually know and can get educated on the issue of gun violence in your local community. So the first thing you can do is actually support gun violence prevention organizations. You can support SEAT. You can support Moms Demand Action. You can support Community Justice Action Fund. You can support Everytown for Gun Safety, Giffords organization. You can also find a local group that is working locally on the ground who is actually doing things like community violence intervention. It's evidence-based work that can actually dramatically reduce homicides in your local community. And this is not a political statement, but you can also call your members of Congress today and tell them that we need to act right now. The last thing that I'll just say is that, I started by saying that I was terrified, but I've also been invigorated just hearing everything that you guys have had to say today. And in my head, I'm friends with Brene Brown, who's also a Texan, but she says that you cannot be courageous and comfortable at the same time. And so I want you guys to just turn to your neighbor and say, I'm choosing courage. Guys, you gotta be louder. Louder. I'm choosing courage again. Okay. I appreciate you guys just giving me a couple minutes to talk a little bit about this really tough issue. And I know that it sounds very simple to say that there are 3 things that you can do, but for those of us who have committed our lives to work on gun violence, but more importantly for me as a person of faith, committed to making sure that that's the bedrock of the work that we actually do as people of faith, that we need you guys in this fight. The people of faith have been doing so much incredible work, but on the issue of gun violence, I think this has been something that has been very separated, and so we need you guys in this fight. And so I'm calling on you all today to have some courage and join us in this fight. So thank you so much.